Nothing will crush a real estate investor's spirit like landlord stress. The difference between being successful and miserable in managing properties is education. Welcome to Landlord University, where landlords learn. Landlord University is recorded from inside the RentPrep office, where Stephen White and Jeff Pearson share the lessons learned from working with some of the most successful landlords.
Welcome to Landlord University Night School. I'm Jeff Pearson. I'm here with my co-host, Stephen White. Hello, Stephen. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Jeff. So we're going to be talking about security deposits today. And
Okay.
I thought this was a really great topic. We've covered it a few times on Night School and Landlord University, but it continues to really be a major issue for landlords because in 2014, that stats just came back, that in 2014, security deposits were still the number one reason that landlords were in court. So it's still an issue, and I think it's been that way for about 20 years, according to the stats. Um, it's still something that landlords are having a hard time understanding, getting a grasp on. And I think a lot of it has to do with the notion that one rule applies to all. And landlords, the one situation that I can bring up that a landlord got himself into trouble was he was living in Michigan, where the rules were one way. And then he ended up moving and buying property in the new place that he moved to, happened to be Hawaii, and the rules were different. And he was still applying the Michigan set of rules, that he was aware of in Michigan. So I think a lot of landlords are not aware that each state has different rules regarding security deposits. And I still think there's some confusion on how to handle security deposits. So certainly worth covering a couple of major points to give landlords some helpful tips on how to avoid time in court over a security deposit.
Yes, very much so.
So, first thing to cover, obviously, when you're talking about a security deposit, one of the biggest things that landlords often will call and ask is how big can the security deposit be? I think there's a sense that they want that security deposit to really offset any risk on their end. Um, the one thing that I'll say that you have to understand is it's not always going to be clean or work out that way where it is going to offset the risk. For example, a lot of states will only allow you to charge the amount of what the rent is. So, if you're concerned about losing 2 months worth of rent and you want to charge 2 months rent on the security deposit, you could already be in violation of a state law if your state specifically says you're only allowed to charge 1 month's worth of rent. And I think that's where a lot of landlords get themselves into trouble. They're looking at it from a logical perspective, saying, what's my risk? What's the cost going to potentially be, and how can I cover that? And that's where they end up overcharging typically. For the most part, most states keep it towards 1 to 1.5 times the monthly rent. A way that a lot of landlords get around this is they charge additional fees that can be considered not security deposit. So, you could charge a pet deposit. You could charge, an additional vehicle deposit, or, if you're bringing a water bed onto the premise, or if you're furnishing the unit, those types of things. Some states do allow for additional deposits, in addition to, so you can't classify that as a security deposit at the end of the day, but they do allow for additional deposits on top of a security deposit. So that's one way that you can help boost that up a little bit. Some states to point out, like I mentioned, Michigan. Michigan is a state that only allows you to charge 1.5 months worth of rent. Some states like Virginia, Maine, Maryland, Missouri, Iowa, Arkansas are all 2 months worth of rent. So you could see if you're a landlord that is in one area and you move to one of these other states, that little bit of difference there can mean a lot in the end. And I think that's where a lot of these lawsuits are coming from.
Right.
So I think overall, the difference between a security deposit and a non-refundable fee, like a pet fee, cleaning fee, things like that. You've just got to be like we are always driving home the point. You've got to be really clear in your documentation. If you're if you're giving back somebody's security deposit, you got to make sure that you're documenting anything that's coming out of that security deposit, what it's for, and be very clear. List line items. If it's for carpet cleaning, list the rooms that the carpet was cleaned. If it was every room, list every room. If it was for damage, list specifically what the damage was. Do yourself a favor, take pictures. It's not a bad idea to include that, give that to the tenant. That way, they've got all the same information as you. And if any litigation does come from it, you've done your part. And as long as you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing, um, you really shouldn't have any problems if you've got good documentation to support your charges.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other piece to that documentation puzzle is you have to be sure that you document when they move in the condition of the property.
Yeah.
And my preference is do a walkthrough with them with a video camera. And any place where there is damage or an existing problem, you want to be sure to just say that on the video and then follow it up with pictures and then save all of the pictures in the video online or wherever you have to so that you have it available. Because then if you come back after the fact and you show that there are spots on the carpet or holes in the wall or whatever, you can show the before and the after. And the before will include a video with you and the tenant in the video, and then with more detailed pictures.
Right. Yeah, I can't agree more. And we talked about that in a recent episode. And to when you're walking through with the video, to double check things is not as obvious as a wall or a door, but open cupboards. Look underneath the sink. Check the plumbing. Certainly on the initial move in walkthrough and the move out walkthrough.
Yes.
We told a story before about the guy who ripped out all the plumbing. So, that's a tough thing because a lot of landlords probably wouldn't think to take pictures of that stuff
Right.
on the move in, but obviously having that and being able to prove. And I think the news story that we covered last week also was the tenant who stole the utilities, and
Mhm.
it's pretty easy to say those were mine or they were never there. But if you have video, if you have photos proving it was here at this time and now it's not, it's certainly going to go in your favor and going to make life a lot easier for you.
That's right. When you think about it, you can do things like turn on the water, turn on the cold water, then turn on the hot water, put your hand underneath it and say that's hot. You could even ask them to do that while you're videoing it. Take a video of the thermostat showing that there's power, that it looks like it's working. You don't have to operate it, but every little thing you can do to show that things are working properly and that everything is in good condition is just going to be to your benefit and to the tenant's benefit. And again, the tenant is going to recognize that you're operating this professionally. You're operating it as a business. And I think they're going to treat the property differently if they have that impression. If they think you're just, fly by night, then they're as likely to treat it that way as anything. So this is an opportunity to show them the professionalism that you're taking with this property.
Yeah. The last thing I'll point out, I know that we've also talked a lot of times about setting up the business end of it and, creating separate bank accounts for the properties, which often helps to, itemize things and separate things for each property and for tracking. It's also great for security deposits. If you have a specific account for that property and you live in a state that requires you to pay interest on security deposits, which a lot of them do. And I would just say, some landlords may disagree with me on this, but even if you don't live in a state that requires you to pay interest, put it in the account. If the account gathers interest, it's not going to be very much anyway.
No.
Chances are. So pay it out. Just pay it out at the end of the thing. Especially if they've been a good tenant, pay it. Pay them back. Empty that account of with the security deposit, and I think that in the end you're going to have a lot less problems if you follow the timeline that you're supposed to for how long you have to return the security deposit. Again, each state sort of differs, but usually, 30 days is enough time for you to assess, is there any damages? Is there anything going to come off of the security deposit, and make sure you get that back to them in a timely fashion. You can't make the person wait 6 months.
That's right.
You know, get on it fast. You want to turn that property over quickly anyway, but there's really no point in hanging on to it. And there's no point in, splitting hairs on the deposit if there's something that you're going to charge them for, charge it, itemize it. If not, return it back to them. And again, if you have it in an interest bearing checking account or a savings account rather, what are you getting on that anyhow? 0.1% maybe,
Yep.
So, it's just, I think it's easier to just dump it in there, forget about it, don't ever touch it. Obviously, you don't want to be accused of misappropriating funds. You don't want to go in there and pay for something out of that security deposit. Until they move out, you have to act as though it doesn't even exist.
Yes. And it makes sense to have separate bank accounts for each property anyways.
hmm
And it would be an interesting question to talk to an attorney as to whether you should have a separate account just for your security deposits. And I'm not sure, there might be some states that require that. But at least have a bank account that you use just for your property.
Yeah.
So the rent payments go to that bank account. And then if you're just going to put it in your own bank account and make payments from it, that's fine. You at least have documentation of everything, and it's separated. And again, as a business person, that's the proper way to run a business.
Yeah. My suggestion would be, like you said, set up each property with an account, set them up with a checking account, because of course, if you're paying for maintenance or anything like that, you're going to want to pay it out of that account, and then attach a savings account to that bank account, which can very easily be done. And then that way, with online banking, you can transfer money to write a check for the security deposit to give back. And you can easily and seamlessly move money back and forth when needed. And that savings account is attached to the checking account. And it's kind of serving two pieces of the puzzle
Yes,
there.
that's
So
perfect.
yeah, so it kind of answers your question. Should you have a whole separate account? That's the best way to do it, because then it is technically in a separate account, but attached to the parent account for that property.
Yes. Now, the primary focus of today's episode is, the differences between states. And certainly we can't go into all 50 states. You talked about the states all requiring that the security deposits be returned within at least 30 days. In California, it's 21 days. So the best thing a landlord can do is, find the specific information for their state. One of the places I like is nolo.com. And we'll go ahead and put a link to that in the show notes at rentprep.com/landlordu. But there is a section where you can select your state, and they give you information about your state. And they also give you some additional places to go for more information. So that's nolo.com, NOLO.com, which is a great website for legal related matters. And again, we'll have a link to that in our show notes. But aside from that, I think we have covered this one pretty well. So I look forward to talking with you tomorrow evening.
Great. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to Landlord University, and remember to visit rentprep.com/landlordu to see show notes and access free resources like forms and guides. And be sure to check out Jeff Pearson hosting his own hit podcast at thementorimpact.com.